Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. My name's Alicia Vaz. I'm a Global Account Manager in the Architecture, Engineering and Construction practice. But today I am delighted to be back as your host for the first instalment of the ArcGIS Update Spring Edition 2024. Now, in today's webinar, we will be taking a look at all the latest and greatest updates to make its way through to the ArcGIS system this quarter, giving you a chance to hear what's new, but most importantly, help your organisation to start to plan for the future. Now, in today's webinar, I am joined by a stellar lineup of presenters, including our Chief Technical Officer, Mark Wells, two of our fantastic GIS consultants, Amy and Eve, and Richard, who is one of our incredible senior support analysts in the business. So I'd like to say a warm welcome to all our presenters. Thank you for joining me today, team. I'm very much looking forward to seeing what you have in store for us. But before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. Today's webinar will be recorded, so if you do need to step away at any point, please do not fear. A copy of the recording alongside the resources and the slides will be circulated in a follow-up email. Today's session is jam-packed with all of the good bits, so we will not have time to take a live Q&A. However, we will be capturing your questions on Slido, and please make sure you log and upvote any questions that resonate with you. This is important because the most upvoted questions will be addressed and answered in our follow-up email. And closer to the end of today's webinar, the poll section in Slido will become live. And this is a really great opportunity to firstly tell us how you found today's session, but also give us feedback and topics that you'd like us to cover in upcoming series. Now, if you haven't used Slido before, to get started, you can either scan the QR code on screen or navigate to slido.com and enter in the event code. So in terms of what we've got coming up today, we're going to kick things off with the headline news, a few short, sharp and sweet updates to be aware of this quarter. We're then going to hear from Mark, who's going to tell us about his 3 key takeaways from 2 of our conferences last week, before we dive into the technology stack, where we'll explore what's new with ArcGIS Online, we'll be getting to grips with ArcGIS Data Pipelines, going to take a brief look at briefings, and then we're going to finish off with the Living Atlas UK edition. So with that, let's get started with the headline news. Now, at the beginning of the year, we formally announced that ArcGIS Desktop would be retiring. And this includes products such as ArcMap, ArcScene, ArcGlobe, and ArcCatalog. From the 1st of March this year, the product itself has entered into mature support. So you might be wondering, well, what does this mean for us as customers? Well, if you continue to use ArcGIS Desktop between now and the 1st of February 2026, you will still be able to log and raise support tickets with us. However, if you are experiencing security or functionality problems, we will no longer be fixing these issues moving forward. Now, this combined with the fact that desktop licenses will be discontinued from the 1st of July this year are 2 key reasons why you should be looking at migrating away from ArcGIS Desktop and onto alternative solutions such as ArcGIS Pro. Now, to help you with the process, no matter where you are, we have a whole host of resources to get you started, whether you're an individual using the tech or you are supporting a team in a business. If you haven't used ArcGIS Pro before, then our first recommendation would be to take a look at our instructor-led course, which has been purposefully designed for the migration across to the new solution. If you're a little bit further down the path and perhaps you just want to upskill on certain elements, toolboxes, you name it, There are some really incredible learning paths to take a look at, which allow you to learn in bite-sized pieces. Everything from the fundamentals, but also high-level topics on the migration. And if you simply just want a high-level overview of what this migration might look like, then I recommend taking a look at one of our past webinars, which was dedicated towards the migration to ArcGIS Pro. Now, it's also a really good time to take stock of the licenses that you have in-house and actually consider, when you're moving teams across or individuals, what do they actually need access to? Solutions like ArcGIS Online, which is our software as a service, has really come on leaps and bounds over the past couple of years. Cartographic approaches have improved, and we've seen the introduction of advanced analytical capabilities. So when you're thinking about the migration away from ArcGIS Desktop, it doesn't necessarily mean jumping directly to Pro. Named user approaches in ArcGIS Online might also suffice. Now, if you're new here and you're getting to grips with GIS and ArcGIS Online, then again, the first point of call would be to explore our instructor-led course, which walks you through the basics of the interface. But again, if you prefer to learn in bite-sized pieces, then the learning plans on fundamentals and security would really add value to your learning and development. And ultimately, if you have any questions or concerns that you want to raise with us, we are here to support you. So please make sure you reach out to your representative at Esri Ireland or Esri UK, and we can help you through this process. Now, switching gears slightly, we're going to take a look at ArcGIS Maps SDK for JavaScript. And in February, we said hello to the latest version, 4.29. Now, with the latest release, we saw the introduction of 8 brand new charting components, which really adds value when you're trying to think about trends or anomalies in your data. With the Oriented Imagery Viewer widget, we saw the introduction of 360-degree imagery support. And you also now have the ability to edit oriented imagery layers, which means you can add or remove data whilst viewing the images in 360. There's lots of different use cases I think this lends itself quite nicely to, but the first that comes to mind is, of course, asset management. When it comes to editing, the sketch and the editor widgets now allow you to draw with constraints. This gives you greater control and accuracy when editing. And in terms of 3D updates, we introduced the capability of custom render nodes. So if you want to manipulate visualization, everything from color modification to animating assets such as wind turbines, or even changing the focus of the imagery, this can all be done with custom render nodes. And to support you with working with the natural and the built environment in a 3D scene viewer, we've integrated a new feature layer type, which is integrated mesh 3D tile layer. Moving on to our mobile apps with field maps, we have welcomed a new element known as info form. This is a really exciting new update. It's a read-only format which allows you to add in text, bullet points, hyperlinks, and even pull through attributes. So if you're thinking about sending individuals out on site for the first time, or perhaps to complete quite a complex survey, you can detail instructions that they can read beforehand. The key thing to note is that you will be capped at 1,000 characters, so it's important to make sure your messaging is short and succinct. Other updates include improvements to offline use checks. We now have the ability to highlight errors in certain layers when going offline, and if there are particularly problematic layers, you can remove them directly from the field map designer. And when it comes to the field map designer, you can now create brand new hosted layers within that view. Not only that, but you can change the coordinate system. So you no longer have to default to the coordinate system supported in the base map. We've enabled support for M values, which is really beneficial if you're doing linear referencing. And you can also manage all of your layers and content from the field maps designer, which means you no longer have to navigate back to ArcGIS Online, which should hopefully help with efficiencies working in one view. Changing our focus to Survey 123, there's a really interesting new capability here in the form of Survey 123 Assistant. If you're new to creating forms, then you can essentially kickstart your survey structure using generative AI. It's a bit like having a conversation with a chatbot. You can describe what kind of survey you want to stand up, the types of questions you'd like to implement, and when you've got the skeleton, you can publish it and then amend accordingly in the web designer. And I think this lends itself quite nicely to perhaps new starters or teams and individuals who might not come from a geospatial background. Other updates include improvements to visibility rules. You can now apply this in bulk, which should save you time if you have a lengthy survey. And if you want to have surveys which are bilingual, as long as the language package is supported in ArcGIS, you can configure and implement different language packages in the web designer and Connect. And finally, when it comes to Workflow Manager, we now have the ability to automate email notifications. So when you think about jobs, when they're created, reassigned, or completed, certain individuals, as long as you identify who they are, could be notified of these changes. We've introduced a brand new arcade variable, so you can now retrieve the username of the individual who has been assigned to a task. And before we send you off to external links, we now support URL redirect modal, which means we will ensure those links are secure before you navigate away to another website. So lots of different bits and pieces to keep an eye out for this quarter, but that draws us to the end of the headline news. And with that, I'd now like to hand you over to Mark, who's going to give us his 3 key takeaways from the Esri Partner Conference and Developer Summit, which was only last week. So Mark, over to you.
That's great. Thanks very much, Alicia. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be with you. I just returned from Palm Springs, as Alicia said. I spent a week there at the Esri Partner Conference and the Developer Summit, and it was a really great week. Lots of content and sessions, and time to catch up with partners and developers. But there are also some key themes that I think really came through during the week, and what I wanted to do this morning is just spend a little bit of time sharing some of that with you. So let me share you my screen. Okay. Great, so hopefully you can see that. So the first theme was around the area of AI. And we've talked a lot about AI over the last couple of years, I think. But what I found really helpful is this last couple of weeks was to think about it in these 2 categories. So firstly, we've got Geo AI. And this really is about combining the power of AI with geospatial problem solving. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a few moments. But then we have generative AI, which is really what we're thinking about around AI assistance. And we've just heard Alicia talk about Survey 123 Assistant. That's an example of a generative AI assistant that can help us with our workflows. This is about applying AI to actually deliver GIS and improve access to and the accessibility of GIS. So let's just look a little bit deeper at these areas. So Geo AI, with this area, we can apply tools and techniques to solve problems more quickly, at scale, and more efficiently really than doing tasks manually. It includes a lot of different areas like computer vision and algorithm development, machine learning and deep learning techniques to do things that, you know, some of us are becoming quite familiar with now, like object detection and classification. So for example, you know, if I've got some imagery, let's just have a look at this example here. You know, this is just a flat JPEG file, remember, it's just an image, but I can use a trained model on it to extract all the roofs of the buildings that we can see in this image. So we've got a model that's been pre-trained, or we can train it and refine it ourselves, and then we can run it on this imagery, and we can generate a layer of features of actual geometries that get extracted from this machine learning technique. And then obviously I can use that in further analysis, like for example, calculating the solar potential of the roof spaces, how much sun are these buildings going to catch throughout the day, throughout the seasons, and how much energy is that going to generate. So this whole area of using these types of tools and approaches, combining machine learning or other GeoAI approaches with geography, this is the area that we call GeoAI, and we've got tools to do this across the whole ArcGIS system in ArcGIS Pro, as well as in the Living Atlas that you can plug in and use directly, and that you can also retrain and refine yourself. But then we can contrast that with the area of generative AI and an area that we're beginning to look at as AI assistants. So, you might be familiar with generic AI assistants, things like Bing Chat Enterprise or ChatGPT. These are generative AIs that understand natural language. They understand the intent of the user. They know how to interpret simple questions, and they know how to go away and find answers to those questions. So if we can help AI assistants become geospatially aware and then integrate that with our technology, we can start then to answer geospatial questions as well, such as, well, what day is my bin going to get collected? Now, to answer that, obviously behind the scenes, my AI has got to understand the question. It needs to be geospatially aware. It needs to be able to geocode my location, query some geographic data sets, generate some human readable responses. Like, ultimately what I'm looking for there is your bin day is going to be on Monday. Now, that's a fairly simple example, but think of the end goal of this, which I think is probably a fair way off still, but think of the end goal of this like being able to ask ArcGIS Pro anything in simple English, and an AI assistance being able to drive Pro even in complex ways to get to your answers. Now, I think that has a couple of distinct applications, which are in fact related, but actually address different audiences, a little bit like Alicia was saying with Survey 123. So, the more we can geo-enable AI assistants like this using natural language approaches to help with our work, the more efficient we can be in helping people answer these really complex questions. So on one hand, that's going to lower the barrier to entry and make this sort of approach accessible to anybody and everybody who can phrase simple questions. That's going to be really helpful for the left-hand side of this diagram for helping enable access to geospatial approaches for citizens and for people who are traditionally non-experts and non-geospatial professionals. But then there's also this right-hand side of the diagram. It's about enabling geospatial professionals like many of you here today to make use of these approaches in your work, to make complex workflows easier, to enhance productivity and help you curate and direct the outcomes that you need in a much more efficient way, rather than having to hand crank everything. So look, this is a developing area. It's very early stages. There's a lot more to do, but I do think it's a really exciting area, and it's definitely one of the themes that we discussed a lot last week. So the second thing I wanted to talk about, and really, keeping with the theme of simplifying access to GIS and enabling wider audiences to engage with it, is about the partnership between Microsoft and Esri around Microsoft Fabric. So Fabric is Microsoft's end-to-end enterprise analytics platform. It's designed for use by businesses and data professionals. So that's people like software developers, data scientists, data analysts. And we've partnered with Microsoft really to integrate ArcGIS with Fabric. What that means is we've effectively embedded highly scalable big data geospatial analytics tools inside of Fabric. And what that's going to do is allow people to make use of spatial analytics and spatial data science natively within the Fabric SaaS environment. And Microsoft have asked Esri to be their spatial provider to spatially enable this system. So I think that's really exciting. But this is about taking GIS to massive audiences. Microsoft's user base is around 1 billion users, globally. That's about 1 in 8 people in the world is a Microsoft user. And when we're about to spatially enable that whole global user base. And at Esri, part of what we see as our mission is to broaden access to GIS and make it more accessible to wider groups of people and make it simpler to use. And Fabric really is going to be an important way to do some of that at really quite huge scale. And then the final theme that I wanted to tell you about today is a new approach that we're taking to sharing and communicating ArcGIS architecture best practices. It's called the ArcGIS Well Architected Framework. And this is a really important piece of work that we've been doing over the last year or so, helping to position ArcGIS as an enterprise system, like you would with a CRM or an ERP system, an enterprise ready, mission critical IT system. And often in the Esri community, I think we can be guilty of really talking in our own language and really living in a bit of a geospatial bubble. You know, we speak ArcGIS, we talk about Arc this and Arc that, and we call things web adapters and geodatabases, when actually more generically the IT community call these things load balancers and data stores. So the well-architected framework is really about being able to position ArcGIS in the language of the wider IT community, which I think is really important for our IT teams, for our system integrators, our technical non-GIS colleagues, if you like. And if that name is familiar to you, well-architected framework, you know, that's no surprise. These things are well established. We're not alone here. If you go online, you'll find Amazon's well-architected framework for AWS. You'll find Microsoft's well-architected framework for Azure. The point here that I'm making is that the IT community is familiar with this type of approach. You know, non-geo people understand what a well-architected framework is. They understand the scope of what it covers and how to interact and use it. And you can go and check it out. So once again, if you go to architecture.arcgis.com, you'll see the ArcGIS Architecture Center, and you can scroll down and you can learn all about the ArcGIS well-architected framework here. So they're my three big takeaways that I wanted to share with you from the Esri Partner Conference and the Esri Developer Summit last week. Firstly, around AI and some of the enhancements that we're making there, but specifically what's helpful is, I think, to differentiate these two types of approach, Geo AI and generative AI and AI assistance. And then secondly, about our partnership with Microsoft Fabric and taking GIS to the masses by spatially enabling that huge environment. And then thirdly, about how we talk about our technology with the wider IT community and making this a little bit more transparent and a little bit easier for people outside of the geospatial community to really understand how to implement how to operate ArcGIS. And so with that, I'll pass it back to you, Alicia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. I'm actually really interested to see what everyone finds of the well-architected framework. I think it's a really valid point what you've made, Mark, how we can speak to the masses about our technology and advances in implementation. So keen to hear your thoughts when you've had a chance to have a look at that. Okay, so next up, I'd like to introduce you to Amy, and Amy is going to tell us a little bit more about what's new in ArcGIS Online. So Amy, over to you.
Thanks, Alicia. Hi, everybody. So as Alicia said, I'm going to be giving an overview of the great new features that were added to ArcGIS Online with the update a few weeks ago on the 28th of February. So I'm not going to hang around. I'm going to jump straight into ArcGIS Online. And hopefully you can see that. And the first thing you might have noticed is that the interface has changed quite a bit. And with that, we now have the option to preview our items. So when I click on the preview button, a panel has been added that displays information about that item. Now, I personally really like this new feature, as I often find myself wanting to know a bit more information about an item, such as which data or layers it contains, or I might need the item URL. And now this can be done much more easily without having to go into the details itself, having to change tabs. So I'm finding that really useful, and hopefully you are as well. Jumping into the map viewer, the first thing we will look at is the introduction of scale thresholds on aggregated layers. So in this map, I have a point there containing points of green spaces in London. This has come from the OS Open Green Spaces data in the Living Atlas. As you can see, I've clustered these points so that it's more apparent where there is a higher volume of green spaces. What we can do now is set a threshold for when this clustering begins and ends. So zoomed out, I can see my aggregated points, but when I zoom in, they become individual locations. Previously, we would have needed two separate layers, one with the clustering and one without, and then we would have had to set thresholds on each one so that they align. This is a great new feature to speed up your workflow. Secondly, I have added a media layer of the Olympic Park to this web map. And for those that haven't used them before, when you add a media layer, you manually place it on the map by adjusting the transparency so that you can see the base map below. a process which some of you might relate to georeferencing. Previously, if you wanted the same media layer in multiple web maps, you would have had to manually georeference it each time. Now, we can save our media layer to our contents pane, and the media positioning, styling effects, and visibility settings will be saved in the media layer item and will automatically adjust to other maps that it's added to. Enhancements have also been made to sketch layers, making them more interactive and making it quicker and easier than ever to add annotations to your map. So here I have a sketch layer that I've used to mark up key features of the Olympic Park, and I apologize for my lack of artistic skill. Now we can select our sketch layer in the properties pane, and for each item, we have the option to edit it, duplicate it, or copy it to a new sketch layer, preserving the styling and pop-ups we've created, speeding up your workflow for editing multiple maps. As well as the updates I've just shown, with the new update, you can now browse for and add custom styles in the map viewer. If you have a web map with more than 10 layers, a layer search appears in the contents pane, so you can more easily find the layer you want to work with. With the addition of box plots to map viewer in October 2023, 6 sort options are now available. For example, you can now sort your box plot categories alphabetically. And finally, enhancements have been made to the way in which we can interact with oriented imagery. Oriented imagery was incorporated into Map Viewer in October 2023 and allows you to view photographs relative to the ground and the direction within which that photograph was taken. With the February update, you can now visualize 360 and panoramic images in the context of your web map. So that's all with Map Viewer. I'm also now going to jump back into my browser and go into the Scene Viewer and show you what is new there. A major enhancement to Scene Viewer with this update is the ability to modify integrated 3D mesh layers from within the viewer itself. And this means that we can now interact with our data in a much more immersive way. Here in this scene, we are in Utrecht in the Netherlands, a place I've not been, but maybe some of you will recognize it. And what we can do now is if I select my layer in the contents pane, we have the option to configure modifications. So I'm just going to go on top of this building here. And if I choose to configure, I can draw around a building of choice in my scene. Can then choose my modification type. So if I choose clip, I am able to view that area without that building and see what it would look like if we remove the object. Can also select mask, and I'd be able to see that building in another setting if I had another scene or base map available. And particularly useful, if I had another design available, I would be able to replace that building with another one and view my new design in the context of my city. We can also draw a new feature, and with this update, editing constraints have been added so that when creating features, you can control the lengths of each side and the angle between them. And a similar update was added to the ArcGIS Maps SDK for JavaScript, as Alicia mentioned earlier. To allow this, we just need to enable tooltips from our settings in the editor. And then when I select my new feature and draw, I can hit the tab on my keyboard and enter my constraint. Once done, that length will only be allowed to be 60 meters. Similarly, if I'm drawing another one and I hit tab, I could make it so that that angle can only be a right angle. This is a great addition to ensure any editing is done precisely. This scene is available in ArcGIS Online as a public layer by Esri Netherlands, so feel free to go and have an experiment with these cool new features. A final point, Scene Viewer has now incorporated adjustable refresh intervals so that your scene is always displaying the latest content. The intervals that can be applied range from 30 seconds to 24 hours. Moving on to dashboards, the key update in February was the addition of splash screens. These can be used to supply information to viewers when they open the dashboard and provide credits or disclaimers. Dashboards also now offer the addition of information windows, allowing for instructions to be opened when a user is navigating their way around your dashboard. You can also now set the time zone of your dashboard, which will be useful if you're displaying temporal data. And dynamic text can now be inserted in an element title and description. I won't go into too much detail on instant apps on this webinar, but if you're interested to learn more about instant apps, we'll be running a webinar specifically on this next month, so look out for that. The key updates to be aware of are that the language switcher capability has been added to more app templates. The manager template is now out of beta. Sidebar now supports oriented imagery. And a new app report has been added that enables viewers to view and submit issues or observations, and these reports are then added to the map. This update brought a number of bug fixes and enhancements to Experience Builder, but the key addition is the new Select widget. So I'm jumping into my browser for the last time, and I'm going to go to this Experience Builder that I've made. Again, we have our points of green spaces in London, and I also have a polygon outlining the borough of Hackney. Now, using my Select widget, I am able to select all of my green spaces contained within my Hackney polygon, and I can choose the layer I want to select by. I think my Wi-Fi's dropped a little bit, taking a bit of time. So I've now got my 301 points selected. And what is great is that with this Select widget, you can now interact with other widgets. So if I go to my analysis widget, I would then be able to run a density geoprocessing tool on my selected features that I've selected previously. By being able to now select features by attributes, spatial relations, or by drawing on the map, this new widget allows you to fine-tune your feature selection. There are also 4 new templates. The filter widget now supports group filters so that you can filter multiple layers. The analysis widget also now includes raster analysis tools. Like in dashboards, you can now set the time zone of your application. And finally, URL parameters are supported in the map and search widgets. I know this has been a lot of information. A final bit from me is to briefly mention a change to the administration side of things to help you manage your organization. You can now bulk delete members directly from the UI without the need for a notebook to run this. When you select multiple members and delete them, you have the option to transfer their content to another member, and you can create a folder for each member's content that you are deleting. Each member's license will be automatically revoked and returned to your licensing pool. At the moment, groups owned by a member cannot be transferred when bulk deleting. And so to transfer groups, a member will still need to be deleted individually. But hopefully this will help all of you who do undertake those admin tasks and speed up that process of transferring licenses. That's all from me, and I'll pass back to you, Alicia.
Thank you, Amy. I think there's some really interesting updates in there, everything from having the splash screen on a dashboard. I think that would help with lots of different audiences, all the way through to a few enhancements for the administrators. So yeah, excited to get my hands on that. So this is just a quick reminder for those of you who perhaps weren't able to join at the beginning. If you haven't already done so, do make sure you log on to Slido. You're logging and upvoting your questions. The most upvoted questions will be addressed in our follow-up email, so do ensure you put them on there. Okay, next up, I'd now like to hand it over to Richard, and Richard's going to tell us a little bit more about data pipelines. So Richard, over to you.
Give me 1 second. This is not the screen.
Not a problem. If you want to try stop sharing and then restarting. There we go, Richard, that's coming through.
Excellent. Good morning, everyone. My name is Richard. My day job is as a senior technical support analyst, but today I'm here with you to present a new product in ArcGIS Online named ArcGIS Data Pipelines. If any of you joined us at our Scottish conference we hosted in September last year, you may have heard my talk whilst Data Pipelines was still in beta. It has since been tested for 6 months with further functionality added, and I'm excited to share as much as I can about this cool new product during the next 10 minutes. This is a screenshot of a geoprocessing tool created in Model Builder, which hopefully is functionality everyone on this webinar is familiar with. Model Builder is an environment to prepare and process data within ArcGIS Desktop and ArcGIS Pro, while Data Pipelines could be imagined as Model Builder for ArcGIS Online. Technically speaking, Data Pipelines is a new native data integration capability of ArcGIS Online, but that's quite a mouthful. So in short, it allows you to connect to and process data from various sources. Similar capabilities have been available through developer technologies like notebooks and Python, but the learning curve to become proficient in these can be daunting. Data Pipelines makes it faster and easier to access, prepare, and integrate data to make use of an ArcGIS Online. This is thanks to its easy-to-use drag-and-drop interface. I'll give you an example, which I'll demonstrate later. You are given a CSV file of data categorized by a local authority, but it is inherently non-spatial. If you want to create a web map, you will first need to join it to a dataset that maps local authorities. You may also decide to apply a filter or calculate a field. Well, all of this can be done in one place within ArcGIS Online, thanks to Data Pipelines. The first question you may have then is, why would you use Data Pipelines instead of Model Builder, which I mentioned earlier? Well, the fantastic thing about Data Pipelines is it provides the functionality to all ArcGIS Online customers, and particularly those users who do not have an ArcGIS Pro license, to create reproducible, no-code data preparation pipelines to streamline their workflows, all within ArcGIS Online. So, what can you do with Data Pipelines? I've already mentioned you can use CSV files. There is much more that can be done. You can ingest either hosted data or any data shared publicly that is accessible via URL. Data Pipelines allows you to connect to datasets in data warehouses. Data warehouses is the overarching term for external data stores that includes Amazon S3, Microsoft Azure, or Snowflake. You can filter and clean your data using a variety of data processing tools. You can calculate new fields and make use of the native Arcade editor. Arcade is our flexible expression language that allows you to work with data throughout ArcGIS. Let's now dive into the demo I promised. Once I've launched Data Pipelines, I begin by selecting an input dataset. I choose my non-spatial CSV file listing statistics for wind turbine use for each local authority in Scotland. These statistics were provided by the Scottish Government. Data Pipelines allows you to preview the data at every manipulation step. We can see that the data has been categorized by each local authority. So this data is definitely mappable, but we need to utilize multiple pipeline tools to get there. I will save this dataset for later and instead add a different input. I will search for the county and local authority boundaries of Great Britain. This is a dataset available on the Living Atlas. Living Atlas data can be consumed in Data Pipelines, just like in other places in ArcGIS. Clicking Preview, we can see the data in tabular format and confirm it has the same area codes as our turbine data. We will utilize this data later. Since this data is spatial, we can preview the data on a map. What I want to do now is limit this data set to just local authorities of Scotland. I opt to choose the tool Filter by Attribute, which is one of many tools available in data pipelines. I apply an SQL expression to filter the data set to just records that have an area code that contains the Scotland prefix. I will now preview the data again to confirm the filter is doing what I want. I am now happy I have a spatial data set to join to my non-spatial turbine data. I select the Join tool and configure the joining fields for each data set. When I preview the join, it now shows the fields from my turbine data in the local authority dataset. Data Pipelines also has the capability to calculate new fields, and this includes a native arcade editor. The field I wish to calculate is a new statistic, turbines per hectare, rather than turbines per square kilometre, as this is used by some communities. In the arcade editor, I paste in the code I wish to use and then add in fields to make it work for my data. Previewing the data one last time shows this new field. I am now ready to create an output of this data. I have the choice to overwrite a layer or append to an existing layer, but in this case, I simply wish to create a new layer. I click Run, and the Run Details pane opens and shows you any messages associated with running the workflow, and it indicates a status, for example, writing records. And that is that. Once it is run, the data is then free to be added to a map. So in true Blue Peter style, this is one I prepared earlier. I'll finish by sharing some key considerations from my experience using data pipelines. Data pipelines simply requires you to be a creator user with the data pipelines privilege enabled. Data Pipelines offers for the first time a no-code environment to process data in ArcGIS Online that is easy to pick up for users of any experience. The ability to save and share pipelines means that processing tasks can be easily repeated and collaborated on with organization members. While Data Pipelines was in beta, a popular feature requested was for the ability to schedule when a pipeline will run. Well, with the full release of Data Pipelines, this has been made possible through Data Pipeline tasks. I encourage you to check out the documentation on this feature if you want to find out more. Now the cost. Data Pipelines usage is charged in credits per minute for either interactive pipelines or scheduled pipelines. Credits for interactive pipelines are consumed at a rate of 50 credits per hour and are consumed whenever a session is active, even in an idle state. So don't go make yourself a cup of tea and leave the session open. Credits for scheduled pipelines are consumed at a rate of 70 credits per hour for the time it takes to complete a task. Looking to the future, another popular feature users have requested is the geocode addresses. The product team have confirmed that they are looking at ways to include this. I encourage you to try out and make use of Data Pipelines yourself. And if you have any suggestions for tools that will improve your workflows, leave a comment in the Data Pipelines Esri community forums. Lastly, we have recently published a blog on our website that covers a lot of what I have covered today. So if you want to remind yourself of anything I have said or want to find out more, be sure to check that out. So to conclude, I hope you saw in this short presentation how Data Pipelines could be a fantastic tool for all of us to use for data pipeline preparation and integration in ArcGIS Online. I will now pass back to Alicia.
Thank you, Richard. Yeah, some really great capabilities there. I think it's fantastic to see just how far ArcGIS Online has come with those capabilities, and hopefully lots of different use cases and workflows where we can put it to the test. So next, I'd like to give a warm welcome to Eve, and Eve is going to take us through briefings. So Eve, over to you.
Thank you so much, Alicia. So hello everyone, and today we are going to be taking a brief look at ArcGIS StoryMap briefings. But before we do, I want to touch on StoryMaps. So ArcGIS StoryMaps is a web application to let you tell your story. You can weave all of your content together with this narrative approach, and it's available to you both in ArcGIS Online and in Enterprise. It allows you to engage your audience with maps, data, and other multimedia like images and videos. A good example being this recent map gallery StoryMap, created by Amy, who you met earlier, to let users explore the relative size of wildfires. Let's look at this example to learn a bit more about the application. So as we've covered, StoryMaps is a creative way to communicate information. And you can create alternatives to the traditional StoryMap as well, with its recently out of beta briefings feature. You may be wondering what application I'm using to walk through this StoryMap, and I am so glad that you asked. So this will be our first of many briefings. So let's learn more about what they are and what you can do with them. So like other stories, briefings are interactive. But what sets a briefing apart from the wildfire StoryMap that you saw earlier is that this is slide-based instead of a scrollable experience. Like PowerPoint, it's a tool to help you guide your narrative. But unlike PowerPoint, this was designed to help you integrate maps and other GIS content into the narrative. And since its beta release last year, they've undergone some changes to make it an even better experience. Things like being able to customize the size of your text, and they've kept access in mind throughout, making sure to adhere to the WCAG standards, such as color contrast checks to make sure that your text is readable. You can also reformat your slides to have it better suit your layout. And then we can also go into the design of the StoryMap. You can pick a different theme, one of the featured themes, which have been professionally designed by the StoryMaps team, or you can use your own and make sure that it adheres to any of your branding regulations. Now, briefings make it easy to have a multimedia approach to presenting. So let's add in some of our own. This is an express map, which is available directly within the editor, and it is great for a quick visual as well as any additional customization, such as being able to change a base map to best suit your needs, add in any pop-ups or other symbology. You can also bring in your own content. And any content that you bring in will have the same security, access, and sharing as the other content within your account. Or you can always use authoritative content from the Living Atlas. Now, other content is available as well. You're welcome to add in your own images, embed links. I'm using this as a way to subtly promote our tech blog and Richard's latest Data Pipelines blog. And then when it comes to the briefing uses, what kinds of purposes can they serve? So it's not just for presentations, but it can be a useful way to spread information during a project to ensure that everyone is on the same page, or in this case, slide. So let's see one in action to better understand its full range of capabilities in a fictional but very plausible context. And yes, this is a briefing inside a briefing on briefings. So this is Millennium House, which is Esri UK's headquarters in Aylesbury, and it is our current fictional construction project and what I'm about to brief you on today. Now, safety is a critical concern to our company, regardless of whether or not you're a team lead, a subcontractor, or a surveyor, and it's our requirement to brief you to ensure that you understand the potential risks of going on site. Now, you may be used to paper briefs, but we've made the decision to go digital for a few reasons. Paper briefs run the risk of being lost or out of date or not being communicated to everyone involved. But with the Briefings app, you have access to this brief anytime, anywhere, and that includes offline. So while I might be presenting it to you now, you could then use this app on a mobile or tablet and disseminate the information later to your relevant crews, and they in turn can access it as they need to on site. That being said, if you have ties to a paper handout, that's still a possibility using the print feature as well. Now, when it comes to going offline, if you choose to take them offline, you still have control over what and how your content is saved to be used remotely. It allows you to let you or your stakeholders download and access these briefings, even when the connectivity is unreliable or unavailable. And to make the most of this, it's important to be proactive and take the necessary steps. Things like uploading your images and videos, or for maps and scenes. In order to ensure that it's available offline, you'll need to upload it as an image or video as an alternative for offline use. If you want it to be interactive, then you need to create and add a mobile map or scene package in order for it to be viewed offline. And then express maps are ready to go. Now, depending on the relevance to your team, you can use this navigation to make it easy to jump around to what's important. In this case, using it as a way to highlight our express maps that we learned about earlier. Now, depending on how you're presenting your slides, briefings are compatible with presentation clickers, slide remotes, and keyboards as well. And as you can see, briefings are a great way to add additional context and to engage your audience. In this case, we've allowed for the use of 3D scenes, buildings, nearby infrastructure. You could even add in layers to provide additional information as well. And it's not limited to just scenes or static images, but you can embed videos too. And when it comes to dynamic content, they'll update in real time as the features are being edited. So as the project is evolving, so will these briefing maps, which keeps everyone up to date regardless of whether they're on-site or stakeholders being briefed at the office. Now, we have just seen how effective a briefing can be to convey a broad range of information, from images and maps to 3D scenes and videos. And you might be wondering what content you could use to create your own briefings. Well, here to tell you more about how to find and use data relevant to you and your organization is Alicia. So I will pass it back to you.
Thank you, Eve. Okay, so great topic. So one of the questions we get asked a lot in our business is around data, and that probably comes as no surprise as we are a location-based company. But questions range from everything from what do you have available, can I use it on a demo, can I use it on a project, all the way through to how can I get involved and contribute my data. So over the past couple of months, our data team have been hard to address this problem, and they have created a self-serving resource, which I'm delighted to formally launch to you on their behalf today, which is the Living Atlas UK edition. Now, this is a dedicated website for both users and contributors who are looking to navigate but also shine a spotlight on authoritative data sets which have been contributed by UK organisations. So let's take a look at this website. Now, if you're new to Living Atlas, perhaps you haven't come across it before and you want to learn about the concepts, the data catalogues, but also what's been contributed in the UK over the past 3 months, then the homepage is the best place to start. So here in the table, we can see the latest data sets that have made its way through to our catalogue. Alternatively, if you're working on a project, you might be thinking about different themes and catalogues of data. So what we've done is we've taken the full catalogue and we've filtered those data sets down to themes in the UK. So everything from environment to boundaries, infrastructure to imagery. Now, you always have the option to view the full catalogue if you so wish, and you can do that by navigating back to Living Atlas. But if we choose a theme that's relevant to us in our project, like environment, we're presented with a subset of categories which have been filtered once more to help us find what we're looking for. So again, we've got a bit of a two-tiered approach going on here from the full catalogue, and hopefully this allows us to find the data sets in a shorter amount of time and with just a few clicks. Now, there may be some of you on today's call thinking about just generally how you can get some inspiration from some of these data sets. So instead of perhaps navigating to the Explore tab, you might want to take a look at the featured content. In here, we have a wealth of different examples, looking at different cartographic approaches, holidays, but also considering some of the most popular data sets we have, like the census and climate data, and how we are interpolating the data sets and representing them in some of our key projects. So if you're looking for inspiration, then the feature content is for you. And for those of you who want to get involved, maybe you're collecting data on a regular basis, maybe you have a great data set you think that our whole community could benefit from, then if you navigate to the Contribute tab, you can read a little bit more about how you can nominate your data, but also read about our tips and tricks to get started, so what we're looking for. And even better than that, you can hear from some of our existing contributors. So organizations from the BGS all the way through to Geolytics, and the list goes on. And finally, if you have a look at this website and you think, I've got a great idea, I've got a great data set that I'd like to contribute, then navigate to the Contact tab and let us know your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to shape this website based on your needs and requirements, so do keep the comments coming. And with that, when we circulate resources, we will be circulating a link to the website, so please keep an eye out for that. So as we draw today's webinar to a close, you will hopefully be delighted to hear that it won't be long before we are back together with another incredible session. On the 25th of April, we will be hosting a session on maps and how we can convert them to apps in just minutes. So if you're interested in the process, you're looking for tips and tricks, or just certain enhancements to your workflows, then this is a webinar that you won't want to miss. So one more reminder, if you haven't already done so, please make sure you get your questions on Slido and you keep an eye out for the poll section, which will stay live for the next couple of hours. If there's anything you'd like to see in the next couple of webinars, or perhaps questions you'd like us to address, please make sure you log and upvote them. So all that's left for me to say is just a huge thank you to today's presenters. A lot of incredible content was covered today, so thank you. And for everybody who attended today, I hope you all have a lovely rest of your afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you again next quarter. Bye for now.